Yeah, I just got off a podcast with Jeffrey Oaks. You follow him, right?
I do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Is it
great,
is it
man.
Oaks or Ochos? I can
Oaks.
yeah, oh, is it Oaks? Okay.
Yeah.
I can never pronounce it. Yeah. Yeah, he comes up to Colorado a bit to study with a buddy of mine, Tom Bukowski and his wife Kelly. And they bring up a lot of people. They've brought up Frankenlegs quite a bit, Leo, and
I know who you're talking about. Leo and who else?
I think they've even brought up the Viking Ninja. His name Esk. Yeah, they
Yeah.
they brought up him. So
Essick.
they've worked with a lot of people,
Doing
and I think
what?
that's great. Just steel mace, just different methodologies on how to learn it. They're pretty cool because they are certified as far as the flow goes, but I think each one of them likes a different take on what you can do with the mace, and they respect each people's expertise in the field for the mace. And I think that's a great thing, Fred. I think that's a little bit more of what the mace community needs.
Yeah. How come you haven't gone to them since they're in your neck of the woods?
Well, I've been so busy either working or teaching or training, those kind of things. So the time schedule just hasn't worked out yet. You know, my podcast has taken off a little bit, Kung Fu Conversations. I'm wearing some swag today.
Yeah.
So, Owen and I are focusing on that quite a bit. We've got interviews going left and right. So we're very excited about that. And that's, taken up a lot of my free time as well as teaching and training. As a matter of fact, I'm on vacation right now. After I hang up with you, I'm going to swing some light. I've got some wooden clubs. I'm going to do some Tai Chi ball, and then I'm going to assemble my wooden dummy, and then I'm going to practice on the wooden dummy for a couple hours to get ready. I'm teaching an introduction to Wing Chun this Saturday and Sunday, the first weekend in February down in Denver at 5280 Shaolin, or Denver Shaolin and Tai Chi. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I always, I've got my notes, how to refine the teaching process. I think that's something that I always look for in a good teacher is how they refine the teaching process. The path to mastery, one of my Wing Chun teacher says this, Sifu Mayer. He's like, the path to mastery can never be shortened. That arc or that curve, you can't shorten that. But the understanding of what an introduction and a rookie can understand about whatever art or field that you're teaching, that can be either refined, or your knowledge or your wording of how you present that knowledge can always be worked on. So I'm always trying to work on how to introduce Wing Chun better and better and better and better. So the students can take that knowledge home and train at one, and two, have some grasp of what I'm trying to show them. So I don't know, just a lot of good stuff going on over here. So super
Yeah.
busy, but I am
Yeah.
going to make that on the agenda. I've worked with Tom a little bit in some Xingyi, and then we haven't lifted a whole lot. I'm going to have him show me some kettlebell stuff. But Tom's certified high level kettlebellist too. I'm a big fan of that guy. There's a picture of us on my Red Forest boxing page, and I'm 5'5" and Tom's 6'7", and he's got the big beard and he's all shredded. And the first thing I ever said to Tom when he was getting out of the car, I'm like, "My God, it's like looking in a mirror." And he started laughing. He's like, "I thought the same damn thing, kid." So we've been pretty much buddies ever since then. But
Yeah.
he's working on his masters right now, and he's got work, and he's got two dogs, and he's got a wife, and he's got his training. So we haven't seen each other in a little bit, but that's on the agenda, is to pick on Mr. Tom.
That's
So
a thing. It's like a problem. I don't know how to solve it. But people fall into their endeavors, you know, getting their master's degree, getting their certifications, work, family, right? And
it
and you're
is.
and these are all important things, and we all want to better ourselves and everything. But the one thing that seems to get left behind is being able to connect with people. You know,
You
it's
know,
it's
eh,
harder and
the,
harder.
it very much is. You were talking. I listened to episode 200 the other day, and you were talking about warriorship, and I loved it. I've
Kind
got
of
on my.
inspired by you.
Thank you, thank you. So let me tell you how I came up with this whole kind of concept. So I have a sub little thing that I'm doing inside of Kung Fu Conversations with Owen. I was listening to a podcast called the Musha Shugio podcast, which is a heck of a thing to say. My friend Dean Suter has this podcast. It's out of New Zealand, and he practices an ancient style of Japanese martial arts. It's for battlefield. You've got multiple weapons, the samurai sword, and it's less for sport, and it's more for this is how you cut off somebody's arm.
Okay.
That kind of stuff. And so the mindset changes. And he had an episode where he was talking about the modern athlete versus the ancient warrior and talking about training apparatuses and mindset and things like that. But it sprung a question in my mind. What are the parallels, not the verses, but the parallels between a modern warrior and an ancient warrior? And one of the things that I find fascinating is how Hollywood has kind of hijacked the term warrior. And basically, we're looking at either Stallone and Conan in the 80s by themselves going against an army. And I think that is an image that's in our heads that a lot of us need to leave behind and grow out of, because it was never real in the first place. It was created by Hollywood.
I thought it was real.
Right. And so you get indoctrinated. Rambo. Yeah, sure, man.
I got the knife. I could.
Yeah, do you have the bow and arrow that you can take down a helicopter with? That's the question.
Well,
that's the question. Yeah,
I don't have that.
You got to work on that, Fred. You got to.
I can take that helicopter with a knife, with a survival knife, right?
Yeah, just like a can opener, bud. Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the things that I've been looking and for this concept for a long time, and trying to reevaluate, what that concept means to me as far as a human being. And one of them is to tribe and finding that tribe. And you were talking about not having time and trying to learn how to make time for your tribe. And your tribe is a Steel Mace Nation, right? You might not be able to work with them directly, but as long as somebody's picking up a mace somewhere, anywhere in the world, you kind of have a connection to them and them on their journey on what the mace can be to them. So that's pretty cool. And, I'm a big Kung Fu geek. I'm walking into my 25th year of training Chinese martial arts.
Wow. Which is weird. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And so
huge.
Anytime somebody trains Kung Fu, I wish them the best. And I love it. And frankly, any style of martial arts. So that's why we came up with our little podcast. We wanted to talk to some people that we thought were very interesting. And this happened to be a platform to reach out to them and hopefully, talk about, broaden the tribe, broaden their perspective and their understanding of what this classical art is. And that's all, honestly, a lot of what the Steel Mace is, isn't it? It's a classical method of training the body to prepare for warfare and combat.
What do you mean by classical?
It's got anything over 100 years for me has some classicalness to it, okay. Right? History behind it. What is the mace? Not the Steel Mace. We can thank my friend Jake Shannon, who's just down the street, by the way. He's about an hour and a half away from me. I'm gonna have to meet him too at some point. We've both talked about that, Jake and I. But what is the Steel Mace been invented? What, since 2006, 2007,
something like that? Yeah.
So it hasn't been around that long. But the Gada in ancient Persia and India has been around for thousands of years.
Right.
And so you have a tool that's fixed, but the methodology and the training of what that tool can do, that gets either passed down by generation or generation, or you have somebody that comes along and reinvents the wheel, whether it be for flow, whether it be for athletics, whether it be for, rehab and fitness. I know you're going to be working on that here pretty soon, my friend. So, rehab's going to be a part of your journey. Yeah. So how can this metal or wooden or stone tool help to improve our life and our journey? Because I honestly think about, the warriorship is not just being on that battlefield, but how do you take care of your tribe? You've got your small tribe, you've got your wife and your daughter. How can you be the best husband, How can you be the best father? And how can you be, your role might change. Something weird might happen at your wife's work. And you're like, okay, I've got to be the friend as well as the husband. So I gotta be the shoulder, you know. So those kind of things, or your daughter had some kind of weird, maybe she had a bad day testing. You're like, okay, how do I be encouraging as a father? So these tools, these training methods, these modalities give us that warrior strength, if you will, um, to give back to our small tribe, and then hopefully we can give back to the bigger tribe. So I don't know, just some thoughts I got going on.
Yeah,
What do you
no,
think?
I think that's awesome. Yeah. And there's like a bunch of you guys, martial artists doing podcasts, and I've been tapping into a few of them through you because you're either dropping their names or they're coming on your show, you're going on their show. Um, one of them what I checked out recently was Dirt Wasp.
Yeah, the Colonel. Yeah, he's an
Yeah,
interesting cat, isn't he?
yeah. I
Yeah,
listen.
Colonel Todd Halsey.
Yeah, he started off, he was just cut and dry, like, hey, this is who I am. This is the way
Hmm.
it is. I was like, all right, this is what I like. Some real peoples.
Yeah, the Colonel has a fascinating history. He was actually the first podcast to take on the Warriorship Conversing project that I'm working on, and he did an amazing job. And he was a little nervous because he's like, "Okay, Randel, no other podcast has gone and done an episode yet." And so I'm like, "Don't worry, I've left this open ended. So this whole concept of the Warriorship Conversing and the hashtag with it is going to be years down the road. As a matter of fact, when we had 3 or 4 other podcasts hop on and start doing the Warriorship Conversing, like Walking with the Tengu with my friend Matthew Kruger out of Alaska, he actually hopped on with Dean Suter, the gentleman that had the Musha Shugyo podcast that inspired me to ask the question of the modern and the classical warrior. And that's what Dean's whole podcast is about, is the parallels between the modern and classical warrior. Well, they sat down and they talked for an hour and a half on the concept, and they cover a huge spectrum. And you can find that episode on either one, either the Musho Shugyo or the Walking with the Tengu podcast. They both posted that episode up a little bit like I'm hoping to do with this one today. So yeah, they go on a long speech on that, and a couple others have done it. I've done a short one. This is hopefully going to be a longer one that I include with it, because I'd like to pick your brain on warriorship, on what it is like to be a fireman. But the Colonel was so inspired by this project that after 20 something years of being with the CIA and the military, he's actually going to write a book based upon these podcasts and the topic of what warriorship is, and how someone in a civilian world can benefit from some of the training, that happens in either a military or a high risk situation occupation, right?
Right.
Um, I'm gonna actually. Why don't I get into this now? So I'm actually gonna. I brought some books I'm gonna mention too. One of the best books I've read in probably 15 or 20 years is The Warrior Within, and it's by a gentleman named DJ Vanis. And DJ is like myself; he's part Native American, but he was part of the Air Force for many years, and he found that the value systems of the Air Force were very much like the tribal upbringing that he was a part of. And so the Air Force actually asked him and recommissioned him to go to some of the tribes, and where the students had high grades, talk them maybe into looking as a career through the Air Force, because a lot of the principles and the moral values that they were raised in would be expressed in their service through the Air Force. And he talks a lot about things that I really think that a modern warrior should convey, service to your community, working on a tribe, the preparedness that you talked about in your episode 200, preparedness, but preparedness through awareness. It doesn't have to be fear based. You're not reaching out with paranoia. but you're reaching out to look at the greater environment to see what the tools that you're going to need if something does happen, right? To take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, those kind of things. And it's very practical knowledge. It's fascinating too, because it's one of those books, Fred, that you read and you're like, God, I've always known that and I've always thought of that. But he said it so much more clear,
Right.
and so much more concise. And sometimes that's a great thing, is hearing the same thing that you think, only said clearer and more concise. That just, it validates a lot of things. And you know, sometimes it talks about, you know, picking up the arrow and picking up the spear, but also what are the things to know when to put it back down again. And I think that that is a big topic as well. You know, we're finally understanding, you know, in the last 20 years, I would say, but I'd say in the last 5 or 10 years, we're actually acting upon it. You know, our warriors that are coming home, that are part of our American military, with PTSD, and how do they deal with that? How did they deal with that trauma? How did they deal with that shock? So he talks a lot about how the tribe has that built in, especially the native tribes have that built in to their structure through ceremonial release. A lot of those ceremonies have multiple meanings. So, you know, a lot of them
Intentionally?
intentionally. Yeah.
So you mean
The dancings,
they were created for the
not
purpose of helping.
multiple purposes. So you were worshiping ancestors, you were worshiping the spirits, but you were also opening yourself up and making yourself vulnerable. And through that vulnerability, you had a vessel to release a lot of tension.
How did
And
they
so,
figure that stuff out back then?
you know what? It's amazing. You know, it's amazing. You know, ancient China didn't know about the nervous system. Not
Yeah.
neither did Persia. But a lot of these things, they didn't know about the fascia. You know, a
I'm
lot.
wondering if it happened like just instinctually.
I think so. You
Like
know,
it just made sense. Let's do a ceremony like this. Just and they didn't even think about it. They didn't overthink it. It just felt right. And it just felt like something that their tribe could use.
you know, it's something that you talked about in episode 200. I'm glad I listened to it recently, because I can bring some of that to the table. You talked about the divorce of what we eat and how we eat, and the relationship to walking to a store, finding processed meat that's already been cooked. Or you can eat, yeah, absolutely. I can go to Sprouts right now and I can go pick up, and I probably will, because I like that. I like it. I like those on my salads. They do the rotisserie chickens. I'll just debone it and throw it right on my salad.
Yeah.
I didn't have to go out. I didn't have my sling with me with a rock in it. I didn't have to hit a turkey in the head and then
Right.
gut it in the field.
Yeah.
You know, all those other things. So we have no relationship to the environment around us, the animals that live in it, the plants that grow in it. You know, it's foreign to us. We live in a foreign world that is air conditioned. For me, thank God, it's heated. You know, all these other things, and so our nervous system maybe gets 1/10 of the use that it was designed for. So if you're only getting 1/10 of the stimulus and 1/10 of the use that the overall human system was designed for, how are we supposed to think that we're healthy in any way? I think that's why a lot of the nature retreats, the hunting retreats are coming back into play. I have a good friend in the martial arts world that his wife was the head, she was the dean of Naropa, which is the only accredited Buddhist college in the world here in Boulder. And they had a very successful master's program in psychiatric care. It was outdoor psychiatric therapy. And so they would do the psychiatric work. You'd take the pills, you do all the stuff, but the group would be around a stream, or maybe they'd go horseback riding, or maybe they'd take a walk in the middle of the Rocky Mountain National Park. And they found that the results were like 86% better when they were outside doing the same therapy, because they were out in something natural. Their body was healing and their mind was healing
And
simultaneously.
it changed their perspective.
That's exactly right.
You're just sitting in an office with a doctor, and it sounds like office, it smells like office, smells like a doctor's office,
You
then
can hear those lights. You can hear the lights humming.
yeah, the humming fluorescent lights, right? And everything's office like. You're a sick person in a building. I'm
Mhm.
sick. My head is sick. I'm on pills. I'm seeing a doctor. But the minute you go outside, even if you're hanging out with that doctor, but they're not going to wear the same clothes. You're you're doing something different. You're out there. You know, when I go snowboarding, which no more the rest of the winter because I blew up my shoulder, but I'll be back for this reason and this reason primarily. I do it with my kid and my wife. And the conversations that I've had with my daughter, 9 years old, on the ski lift are completely different
Yep.
than a conversation we have like when we're sitting at the table or in front of the TV. And I love those conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I actually mentioned this when I was, I think it was episode 150 I was on or somewhere back there. But, I was raised on the western slope, 15 miles outside of the Rocky Mountain National Park. We had a 4-day school week, which is probably why I drive a bus. But, I grew up in a meat hunting culture, meaning that my dad and I were not trophy hunters. As a matter of fact, we didn't even hunt male deer or elk. We were always after cow or doe because we were meat hunters, and the meat we put away, we would eat for the winter on, or we share with friends. We were also small game hunters, which I actually preferred. And it's highly illegal and nobody ever bothered us because it was maybe the early 90s. But 40 miles from the house outside of Kremling, there is an area called the State Bridge. And I had a little single 410 shotgun. My dad had a single shot. He also had a 410 single shot. And we would walk with it open over our shoulders. We had maybe 4 or 5 shells with us. That was it. We could do it with 4 or 5 shells. And we walked along the train tracks. And that's where all the wild turkeys would hang out. And
Oh,
so we'd walk 3 or 4 miles along the train tracks. And like you were talking about with your daughter, my dad was a completely different person than when he was being a professional chef in the restaurant. And I
right.
actually worked for him as a busboy. And to see him under all that stress, like watch it kill him. And then
Yeah.
we were also selective cut loggers. And it was awesome because we'd make these big sandwiches and stuff. He would wake me up god awful early, make me a thermos of cocoa. I would sleep in the truck because it would take an hour to drive to the site where we were doing the logging. And then we would get up and we would do this and we'd eat lunch together. We'd be playing 50s music and we would talk about philosophy and life skills and what it is to be a human being on this weird planet. And that's where I got to know my father as a human being and not just as a father. So there is something to be said about taking these retreats, about going camping with the family, because you might find that there's somebody that you never knew and be surprised on who they are in a good
Yeah.
way.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
In,
You
in a,
have to get outside of your usual areas that you're always frequenting because you start to act almost like you become a character
yes,
in your environment that
yes,
you're typically dwelling in. Like, okay, when we're home, I'm dad. But when we're up on the ski slopes and I'm snowboarding next to my daughter, I'm a kid too. So
absolutely.
now I'm joking around differently. I'm letting go of all the BS in life. Kids are already good to go. They're not worried about it. They're in
That's
the moment.
exactly, yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm getting more in the moment. So my kids seeing their father in the moment, which is a treat for them.
Man, that's got to be good for you too, because you like you said, you get to let the mask down, you'll get to let the
Yeah.
guard down, and you'll always be dad. But now you get to show, yeah, I was a kid too. I like to play too. I like to have fun too. I've got a good dad joke or two, that I don't get to tell at home that I might tell you on the ski lift.
Yeah.
So in that natural environment, we get to be who we are, which is natural. And it sounds so obvious, but again, we're talking about getting together with our tribe. Sometimes it's hard to do that. And so we make excuses and we make barriers on why aren't we going out snowboarding? Well, you've got a good reason. But why are we going out camping? Why aren't we taking a family walk through the park? Why aren't we taking a country drive and maybe sit somewhere and eat outside and have a picnic? Whether it's cold or not, who cares? We've got a warm car. We can be cold for a little bit. Let's just sit outside and eat, a little bit like that, and then hop back into a warm car and go home. Those kind of things are important for the growth of a human being. And those are things that we need to get back to. There's no hippy dippiness about it. There's no woo-woo-ness about it. You were talking about medicine, and it's fascinating because I look at it, completely differently. I think we need a little bit of the East and a little bit of the West, or a little bit of the West and a little bit of the East, whatever hand you prefer. Because if you look at the different systems, the West will treat you, Fred, when you're sick. Western medicine treats you when you're sick. A lot of the Eastern medicine, they treat you when you're healthy because they want to keep you healthy. Whatever you're doing, they want to add on to it, like a vitamin, if you will, right? I can't remember who I was listening to the other day. Oh, I remember, but they were talking about, martial arts and like the depth and the breadth of martial arts. It's like if certain styles specialize in things, right? Like my Wing Chun does. It's a short range boxing system. It's like the highest grade vitamin C that you could possibly take. But something like Xingyi has a body training method, has a joint training method, has a power training method, has a method of boxing, has a method of kicking, has a method of grappling, has a method of joint locks, has a method of reversals. So it is a martial art also, but it covers so much more where it would be like a multivitamin, right? Both of them are good for you. Maybe you're short and deficient on vitamin C, then that's what you need. You need a good vitamin C pill. But to treat the overall human being, you want that multivitamin. Well, Eastern medicine kind of does that. It's showing you, okay, you're good, you're healthy. How do we keep you there? How do we keep you performing optimally or even take a step forward, right?
Right. Yeah,
So I don't know.
the interesting thing that people say is Western medicine, it's all about money. They want to keep you sick so they could, keep making money off you. But they can make money off of doing it the other way, keeping you from getting sick. I mean, if you're a healthy person, you're not thinking about headed to the doctor as frequently. But if there was a system in place where it encouraged healthy people to come in, interview with a doctor, the doctor says, oh, okay, so you're eating this way, you're doing that. Well, look, your blood work's great. You're exercising. I don't see anything wrong. We're going to keep you this way because, this is going to save you money, but you're going to have to come in for checkups frequently, and we're going to, do certain things to keep you healthy, which they could bill for. Maybe they
Yes,
won't make as much, but they could still make a living.
that's exactly right. You think about it, it decreases the overall burden for the taxpayer, if that's how you look at it too, which I think we all should. And then two, you have a healthier aging populace. I am super, super duper close to my mother. She's pretty much my whole world. And she's going to be 73 this year. And Fred, when she turned 70, I watched 5 years of age add on to her. And then when she turned 71, I watched another 5 years add on to her. She was part of the generation. It's like, you got to work 3 jobs, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I will thank my mother till the end of time. I got to play football. I got to be part of the track team for a year. I wrestled. I was part of all the plays, all the extracurricular activities I could possibly do. She helped me out through college. My mother is a queen, but she never had a process where she ever took care of herself. She was more into, needlepoint or ceramics, those kind of things. And it wasn't a part of her, her mindset.
Right.
And
A
now,
lot of those older generations never thought about. They always just thought about other people. That's it.
God bless them. God bless them for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. We need
absolutely.
more of that. I think people are too selfish nowadays.
I think what we're finding though too is, and DJ talks a little bit about this in his book, and you've mentioned it also, that we also have to take care of ourselves to give more
Yeah,
to the people that we want to give to. I can help my mother out now, with finances or things like that, because even though I work an awful schedule with the bus driving, I have a pretty good financial path that if I need to pick up 10 hours of overtime where I'm making close to $50 an hour, I can do that and I can help mom out. You know what I mean? I don't do it all the time, but every once in a while, she deserves that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't have the drive and the energy to do that unless I had a physical training and a mental and emotional training practice to extend to my tribe, which is my mom. you
yeah,
know so it's got to be that balance, it's got to be that scale. It's a whole thing of, it's never the lone wolf, it's the tribe. Well, sometimes you need to walk away from the tribe, not forever, but just for a day, an hour or two, to recharge your battery to give back to the tribe. And so it's usually never one thing, is it, Fred? Because usually if we get too much this way, if you do too much just for the tribe and you're not a part of it, that's when you shrivel.
yeah,
And if it's too much well, that's not good enough. You weren't just put on this earth just for yourself. So learning to find that balance, and it's not going to be the same for everybody too. They're going to have to work on it, but they're going to have to work on these processes and this path, this warriorship path of trying to do better. I was trying to think about, you were talking about what is this warriorship concept and things like that. And I kind of tried to come up with something, and I wanted to pitch this at you because I thought of this popped in my head while I was listening to your episode 200 podcast. I think the warriorship concept is taking the primate, or the primal, however you want to look at it. Maybe less the monkey and more like the primal. The primal could be elemental, it could be animalistic, whatever it may be. That ancient warrior. You're taking that and you're forging it into something useful. You're taking that primal fire and you're forging it in a container of usefulness to yourself and to the people around you. Because if it's just open, if that primal is just continually fed and fed and fed, and you don't have a process or a path to help others through that, well, then it's just going to burn you and the others around you. So that is really the magic, is taking that primal fire and finding a path, whether it be teaching kettlebell, whether it be teaching mace, whether it be teaching martial arts, whether it be teaching first aid, whether it be teaching, safe drive. Find your passion, find that fire, find what gets you, lit, sweaty, and get out there and share that with the world.
yeah. That's I think that's great. Yeah, because you're getting your energy and your power, if for lack of better words, from that primal place. It's a friggin' volcano. It's almost out of control, right? Or it is even out of control. It's a pure energy place. So those who harness into it have to do it with discipline, because like you
Mhm.
said, it'll just go out of control. It'll be willy-nilly. It'll hurt you. It'll hurt others. So discipline.
That fire has implications, that primal fire, if you will, on everything in our life. It has to do with our emotions. It has to do with our body. If I continually overtrain, I'm never going to have time to recover. So I'm going to break down. That's why the new catchphrases are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating the right food? Are you resting properly? I'm hearing now more and more that it's not so much what you do for training, but it's how you do recovery afterwards.
Yeah.
There's the balance. If I'm always thinking about aggression, priming my fire, I am going to hurt the people around me as well as myself. Because if you can't control your aggression, or you can't control that anger, then you're going to release it on the people that you wanted to least release it on. and the pain to you will be losing them, and it's unrecoverable. So
No.
we have to have discipline and methods and modalities on how to channel this primal fire and put it into a path or a vessel or whatever it is you will, to make it useful to the people around you as well as yourself.
Yeah. And that's my big thing with warrior mindset, because I'm looking at our society now and I'm saying, we're in
Yeah.
trouble. We're in trouble as a people. And what can I offer to as a advice? And my advice is learn how to be a warrior. Even if you don't feel like you're really being a warrior, even if you feel like you're faking it, just learn it. Read the
Fake it till you
books.
make it. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I
Sure.
mean, because unless you're planning on becoming a monk or endeavoring on Bible studies, or I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there. You know, what can you do right now that's going to get your frame of mind focused where you are supporting your tribe and therefore supporting the whole society? Because
All right.
like
Okay.
steel mace people we're a tribe, kung fu people, you're a tribe. But if we're talking to our people with the same message, well, your tribe is growing and my tribe is growing.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
therefore the whole society is coming up under this warrior mindset.
That's exactly right. And the thing too is, this is going to be, maybe controversial, but let's get a little controversial here. I don't think that violence has to be the first step into warriorship.
No.
And I'm gonna give you a couple. And
I don't think so either.
This is one reason I'm on this show, because I want to pick your brain on this.
Mm-hmm.
DJ talks about a lot about communication with his group, especially when he was with the Air Force. And I would like to know, because what you have communication protocols, right? So when you have a fire, Fred, what are some of the first things that happen? What are the first things that, let's say you guys go through a mock scenario and the fire alarm goes off. This isn't a real fire, it's a mock scenario. If you're teaching your rookie firemen, it's got to be through communication. So what are some of the key skills of communication that you guys go through? Could you share that with us, Fred?
Yeah. So, you want to be clear and concise. That's the most important thing, because if people don't hear you and they don't know exactly what you mean, then they're not going to do anything until they understand. To be clear and concise means you have to slow down, you have to speak clearly, you have to actually maybe even stop and think for a second about what you want to say before you actually say it, right?
Yeah. That's really good for everything, isn't it, Fred?
Everything, especially if you're talking to your spouse or your kids or whatever,
family.
Yeah, right. So it's all the same, this communication understanding. But the other thing is you want to make sure you get their attention. So you don't just say, hey, go do this and that. Well, how do you know they're even listening to you right now?
Sure.
So you want to, look at them. If you're on the radio, then you're going to call them. You're going to wait for them to answer back. Now you know you got their attention. Now you speak clearly, concisely. And then you ask them, you could ask them, do you understand? Like same thing with your kid, right? Like, do you understand what I'm telling you? Let them repeat it back, because they might not have gotten it. So you say that to your crew, like, hey, do you guys understand the mission? Do you guys understand what we need to do? And taking that extra second to do that seems like, oh my God, we got to hurry up. We don't have time for all this niceties and stuff like that. No, this is the time. Make sure before you go up on a roof where there's fire underneath, that
That's exactly, yeah.
everybody is on the same page. They know what their job is, how they're going to do it.
So does that come into attention to detail? Like as far as like everything from rolling up the fire hose properly to where you store your gear, how clean it is, all these other things. I think that's another big thing in warriorship is the attention to detail. You know, swinging a mace. Let's look at it that way. Let's look at swinging a mace. So I actually did powerlifting a little bit in high school and college. And I've paid coaches $500 to work on my squat. So that's looking at one lift that I've paid somebody $500 to work on it with. And this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, but the thing is their attention, their experience with that lift, their experience with human anatomy, their experience in understanding how to do things properly and how to teach and adjust somebody. That's what I was paying for.
Yeah.
It's the same with doing a Mace 360. You know, somebody that's done it for over a decade, but has taught thousands of people is going to refine their teaching process. So they're going to have more detail in their communication for these little steps. Do you guys have I'm kind of mentioning this, but do you guys have a lot of that in your, this is how you tie your shoelaces. This is how you put on a backpack. This is how you put on the tank, those kind of things.
I mean, that's very militaristic. That's like, you know, the Marines and everything. They're down to like how you wear your underwear and everything.
Sure.
No, it's not quite like that with the fire department. The fire department's a little looser than that. And I think that's because it's a long career, 25 years. Yeah, there's people that go into the military for that long, but the average people don't actually. They know it's like a limited time where they're going to be in this compressed situation where they're told everything they need to do. And then they're there for a while too. Yes, we do a 24-hour shift, which goes by actually kind of quick when you get used to it. But then we're home with our families again, and we're home for 72 hours, and we're not bringing any kind of authoritative military style talk or thinking into the door, right? We're leaving that outside, and we become loosey-goosey again. And you just can't, you can't. And then the other thing too is the nature of the job. Yes, it could be dangerous, but we're not going into a line of fire either. So we tend to have a little bit more slack in our line, if that makes sense.
Sure. Although you guys still are out there risking your lives daily, so thank you for that, my friend. Thank you for that. I've got a question for you, and then I'm going to share something that's non-warrior-esque, but it might help you guys. I think you might like this. What is something how long have you done this, by the way, Fred? What are you in 15, 17 years of firefighting?
I just started my 20th.
My God, congratulations, Fred.
It went by so fast. They warned me. They said it's going to go by fast. I said, yeah, but it's not going to go by that fast. And I'm like, oh my God, that went by fast.
You're going to have to write the book, man. You've got 5 more years. So the book, the Steel Mace Fireman book has to be coming up. What is something, and we're going to call you a professional because after 20 years, you're a professional at it. As a professional firefighter, let's say I'm a civilian, which I am. What is something that you feel that I could benefit from you, like knowledge as a firefighter? What is something that you've learned in the field that you think that everybody should know as a civilian?
Well, off the top of my head, I'm sure I could think of a bunch of things. But
that's another episode. That's another solo cast.
Yeah, right. Yes. But the one thing I would tell civilians is that they need to be a little bit more put more consideration into their world around them as far as their safety is concerned. That goes with where you live, your car you drive, just your whereabouts. Because we go to accidents, we go to fires, we see all sorts of things. Another name could be emergency department. We go to emergencies. We go to building collapses, right? We've gone to where ice slides off the roof and hits people on the head. So, you're a homeowner and you're like, well, I don't live a dangerous life. Well, do you have ice on your roof?
Sure.
What about your car? Do you have a lot of like weird? Do you have a bunch of maces in your back seat so that when you guilty when when you're driving and what if you get into a roll and those things are spinning around in there like a friggin' blender, you know? But even look at your house, things that could possibly hurt you, or I mean, what about, your dog getting stuck in a fence and the fire department having to come and open up the fence bars to get the dog out? Like these are, things that people should think about, prevent the accident from even happening. Put us out of
Uh,
business,
sure. Sure. Yeah. And I think that becomes, again, awareness and understanding of your environment.
right?
Right.
It goes right back to what we were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That society is divorced, disconnected. We're not, paying attention to the natural world around us anymore. We live in this cushy lifestyle. We don't even have to cook our chicken. I mean, what do you got?
That's it, man. That's it. That's it. It's crazy. The awareness thing for me, that's maybe one of the things that I use directly in my line of work. I am, at least not with work. I'm definitely not a warrior as a bus driver, but I am a public servant. And that's something that the Warriorship Within book talks about, the Warrior Within by DJ talks about, is also learning to be a servant. And I think I've tackled that one pretty good.
If
And
you
so
were
the
gonna
thing,
if you were
sure.
gonna write a book, do you have any ideas for books? I ask because I love reading people's work. I read books like you do. And I always say, how do these people write these books? Because they're so fresh and new. But then you kind of also understand that there's nothing new under the sun. And warriors have been writing great books for centuries. So is it a talent to just present something fresh and new when it's old? But what would you do if you were going to write a book?
If I was going to write a book about anything
Yeah,
or just
anything.
anything, I would probably write about what I know. And that's a big trick. I have a minor in writing and English lit degree as well as a few other degrees. But and that's an easy saying. It's a catchphrase on writing what you know. But I have done, like I said, Chinese martial arts for 25 years. I practice three styles. I'm not very good at any of them. Maybe Wing Chun the best since I have my most amount of time in it. But I am a working man practitioner. And so if I was going to write a book on on anything, it would probably be martial arts and time management. How do you have an extreme schedule and still get legitimate practice in? And
Wow.
how to do time management. Because what I'll do is I'll do either months at a time on a certain style, or if I do months at a time on the three styles that I do, I'll practice one or two things. Like if I'm going to do Bagua, I'm going to do some Jibin Gong, which is like a hand method that attaches the body and the back. I'm going to do that, like two or three of them for that whole month, just those high repetition. And then I'm going to do the circle walking, where you walk in a circle one way and then you change your hands and you're walking in the circle the other. So those are going to be the three or four things that I work on in Bagua. With Xingyi, I'm going to do my standing practice, and then I'm going to do one animal, and that might be the only thing that I work on for the whole couple months. And then with Wing Chun, right now I'm doing a lot with the long staff or the long pole, and I'm doing a lot with the wooden man. So I'll train that for a few months. I'll journal it because I like to journal my practices. That's something that if you do martial arts or any kind of physical training, journal your training.
I
That
just
that's
told you I got off of a podcast with Jeffrey Oaks, literally
mm-hmm,
right before you.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
we talked about that. And he said the same thing. This is so great. I mean, to hear from another coach, the same thing. And we talked about the importance of writing things down and journaling and stuff like that.
Oh, it's what you find. Here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the holes in my training. And what I mean by that is it's like, wait, I have this whole other set that I haven't touched for 2 years. I'm going to go back to that and work on it because I haven't worked on it in 2 years. Can't be that good. And what I find fascinating about systems like Wing Chun, when I work on the knives, it actually makes me better at my empty-handed stuff. When I work on the long staff, that actually makes me better at my empty-handed stuff. When I work on the wooden man, that actually makes me better at the footwork for the long pole. When I work on the wooden man, it actually makes me better at the hand paired movements when I have the knives in my hand. So everything feeds off of itself. So it's not like I'm totally abandoning all the other previous training. That's what's so cool about training like kettlebells, mace, heavy Indian clubs, things like that.
Where does Mace help you with something else?
Yes. As far as like my physical and personal training. So I've been saying this a lot when I've been on other podcasts as well as my own podcast. So the thing that I'm fighting these days, and I'm literally fighting this, is sitting. Fred, I sit on a long shift 12 hours a day. So when I get out of the bus, I'll walk, or if it's in a good place where nobody can see me, I'll lock up the bus and I'll go up and down the aisle doing some of my Kung Fu forms.
Which is the first podcast that I had you come on, you were going for one of your walks.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
And so, you're getting the podcast, then you were managing your time.
That's it. Because I was on a split.
Yeah.
I had a couple hour splits. And so after I hung up with you, I went back to work and drove for 4.5 hours. And I had already driven 6 hours that day.
Yeah.
So any kind of movement I try to get back into my life. The bus driving that I've done for 13 years now is the first job that I've ever had where I am not doing anything physical. And it is the only beef that I have with the job. I love driving and I love people. And I'm really considerate to my passengers. And that job's only two things, Fred. It's customer service and it's safety. And when I give good customer service, it takes care of everybody in the bus. So then all I have to worry about are the ding-dongs around it, because that is hard enough. That is hard enough. So what do the kettlebells, what do the mace, and what do the heavy Indian clubs do for me? So I think it's similar, not exactly, but it gets into similar rotations and movements and coiling that the Kung Fu does. But since it's something that's outside of the body, since it's an external object, it can maybe get into those areas that when I think about, okay, I'm rotating the wrist here, and then I'm rotating the elbow, that I can only get so deep into with my mind. But when I have an apparatus or a tool in my hand to move it that much further or that much deeper, that helps me get greater rotation and movement and strength in those ranges. Also, what I realized was for years and years and years, I was training traditional Western weightlifting, point A to point B, point A to point B, tricep extension, point A to point B. So I was isolating a muscle group and I wasn't training the whole. And then it was linear movement. What I needed to combat sitting for 10 to 12 hours a day is dynamic movement. And the Shingi and the Bagua have added that for my Kung Fu, where the Indian clubs, the mace, and the kettlebell.
Yo, Randel. Looks like we lost him. All right. Well, that was pretty good. So that was Randel Davis, and he's running a podcast called Kung Fu Conversions. And if he doesn't make it back on, I'm just going to end the podcast right now. But that was really awesome. Here he is. All right.
Well, we should wrap it up because we've been at it for a little bit. Anyway, the weight, the spherical weight training, or the dynamic weight training, has helped me in every area of my life, and that's staying mobile and active. Because I'm hoping someday to be married and have kids, and I'll be one of those creepy old dads. So I still want to be able to throw ball and catch when I'm in my 70s.
Yeah, so, right. That's the best thing to endeavor for. So that's if you take anything away from this podcast, or anybody's health and fitness podcast, it would be you want to be able to live into your old age still kicking the balls out of life.
That's it, man. That's it. I got one last thing and I'll let you go, Fred.
Shoot.
So first off, thank you for your time today. It's great to see you, my friend.
Wait, I'm definitely using this as a podcast, but
let's just joint podcast it. You can send me the Zoom link if you want.
Okay.
And I'll just post it on mine. But if you want to post it on yours, I'm going to send you a cool picture of myself that you can post on there. Right. But I wanted to talk about some quick books real quick, and then we'll get up to the last thing. So DJ Vanis, The Warrior Within, that's a must-have. They actually have it on audio book too. It's a great book. This gentleman, Gary Quisenberry, he was in the military. He was also a security guard for a prison, like high-level prison. And he was an air marshal. And he's got a great book out, Spotting Danger Before It Spots You. Great mindset stuff. This is a hard read, but a brilliant book. The Body Keeps the Score. Just remember the name. I can't pronounce Bessel van der Kloek correctly because that's how his name's pronounced, I think. Bessel van der Kloek. It covers a psychologist that studies trauma victims. And it shows how they keep their trauma in the body, like rape victims and Vietnam vets. It's a hard read, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating read. And I actually think it goes along with a lot of the Mace and kettlebell stuff that we're doing, because we can also learn to release our trauma through those movements, right? And then the last one, it's a local cat. It's a goofy looking book cover. He's a goofy guy. My buddy, Dr. Rick Perea, he is a PhD. He is a performance psychologist, which is a relatively new field of psychology. You know what I call it? I call it the Tony Robinson stuff. Yeah. Only it's backed with research, so it's a little more than just woo woo and fluff and feel good.
Yeah.
Well, his book that he has out is excellent. It's called Decision Point: The Moment Leaders Are Born. And what it's about is it's taking trauma in your life, like something that awful that happens. His story, and he actually has a lot of stories in there. His story was his brother, when he was 12 years old, who was 18 and just graduating high school, was murdered by his best friend. And so what he did was, at that age, he realized, I have to live two lives. I have to live the life that I have, and I have to live a second life for my brother. And so at that point, even as a young man, he chose to use that not as a crutch to hold him down, but as something to lift him up to the next level. Right. So learning how to take horror and trauma in our lives and use that as fuel to fire, that primal fire again, that primal burn. How do you take that and encapsulate that and turn that into something useful for yourself and everybody else around you? That's a warrior's path, brother.
Yeah, right. That sounds like a good book. I might have to actually grab that one. It reminds me of, I did have a little PTSD thing going on from firefighting, from just seeing victims. Let's put it that way. Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yep. And so it was, I didn't know for a while, but it was bothering me. So I did go see somebody, and, basically it was like what you just said. Like the guy didn't try to get me to forget about it. You're not going to forget about it. And it's always going to be there. It's powerful. So he talked to me in a way that made me understand to take that and realize that there's something good out of it. And I know that sounds weird.
No, and I know what you're saying.
But you're taking the trauma and you're turning it on its ass and using it. It's either going to use you or you're going to use it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I want to read that book, because that's something that is really interesting to me. And
he's got a podcast. I'll send you some links to his stuff. Okay. He's a goofball. I think you'll like him, Fred.
All right. And maybe if you send me that, I'll put them in the show notes for anybody else who's interested.
Sounds good, Fred. Yeah. If you'll just hashtag Warriorship Conversing, you'll be with all the other podcasts that are doing this right now. We've got about 5 or 6 of us. I'm going to use this one as another one of mine. And then I'm hoping at some point to actually maybe get DJ Vanis on and talk to him, because he's been on a ton of podcasts recently. He's been all over the place. He's the one with the Warrior Within book, and that's actually on audio as well.
Right.
So you can listen to it that way. Anything else, Fred? That was a good, long, awesome conversation. It was great to see you, my friend.
How can people in my audience get in touch with you?
Awesome. So as far as the Kung Fu stuff goes, for me personally, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. It's Red Forest Chinese Boxing. Red like the color, forest like the trees, Chinese like the good food, and boxing like Muhammad Ali. Red Forest Chinese Boxing. And then our podcast that I'm doing with my Xingyi and Bagua instructor is called Kung Fu Conversations. We have a YouTube channel. We are on all the links like Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple Cast, Google Cast, Amazon, all that other stuff. So check out Kung Fu Conversations. You can listen to us there. We're selling awesome t-shirts. We've got all kinds of different things. We've got guests coming out the wazoo. If you're interested in Chinese martial arts, or you're just interested in training and how that relates to maybe a martial mindset, it's a great podcast to check out. Kung Fu Conversations on Instagram, on YouTube, on any place you get your podcast, as well as I have a Facebook page